That was my kid brother broke his arm. You did a good job, Doc, even if you was drunk.
Thank you, sir. Professional compliments are always pleasing. Yes, sir. What happened to that boy whose arm I fixed?
He was murdered.
Welcome, everyone, back to another edition of Let's Take 5, the podcast where we look at a cinema legend and discuss their excellence and range. My name is Eric Martindale.
My name is Austin Luger.
And today we are carrying on with our John Ford 5. Carrying on seems really appropriate for John Ford. We will carry on with My Darling Clementine. We're doing that today. That's the third film we covered. Previous films we covered were Stagecoach and The Grapes of Wrath. We'll wrap up with The Searchers and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. But today we're talking about My Darling Clementine, which is the story of Wyatt Earp and his brothers and Doc Holliday in a town you might have heard of called Tombstone. If you haven't heard of Tombstone, you might have heard of the pizza's Tombstone that's named after it.
Or the movie called Tombstone.
Or, I know. I was trying to avoid that. That was going to be that's the joke, Austin. Come on.
No.
Come on,
I'm going to step on that joke right away.
You step on my joke. And then the shootout, the OK Corral, which is one of the most famous cowboy shootouts ever, in part because it actually happened. These characters were actually real, so that's pretty neat. And by real, I mean Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday specifically. Mm-hmm. So Wyatt Earp is hanging out, and he's bringing his cattle across the plains.
And he used to be a marshal.
This guy kills his brother, takes his cows. He decides to be the marshal in Tombstone, which is the most lawless town in the West.
And he wasn't, elected.
He wasn't elected.
He already had a star.
He was just trying to get a shave. Yeah. This whole film happens because Wyatt Earp, played by Henry Fonda, is trying to get a shave. He's just trying to get a shave. And a bullet comes into the window and almost hits him, and then he's like, I'm going to be the marshal.
Yeah, a ton of bullets come in. I'm going to say right away, mistake number one. That was a great beard Henry Fonda had. You often see Henry Fonda with a beard, I'm like, wow, he is pulling off that full beard. Walks in town with a shave, I'm like, dude, think about it.
I want to long for a shave like men did in these films. Like, if you get a shave, you're the most refreshed individual on the planet. Like, they always talk about a shave like it's this, euphoric thing.
They all rise from the barbershop chair, touching their face, good job.
I got a shave. Yeah. So this happens. He becomes the marshal. He throws an Indian out of town, a super racist scene. Mm-hmm. And which is typical for John Ford films. I don't want to say at the time. It exists through that, but I think The Searchers, while it has that, it's kind of judges the character who is the racist at the end of it.
Searchers is the different one. This and Stagecoach really look at the ultimately fictional idea of cowboys and Indians. Mm-hmm. And that is the complete essence of the nuance in these two films.
Well, in Stagecoach, it's important and obviously to get to the big grand climax at the end of the film. In this film, it's less so because the shootout in the OK Corral doesn't involve Indians.
Correct.
Doesn't have anything to do with Indians.
Nope.
So there's no build towards anything to exist. I mean, in Stagecoach, it works however racist it still is. It works because you have to build this threat off screen that eventually comes to pay off in the end.
You're also going through their land.
Yeah, and you're also going through their land. Well, that's true, too. But you're building it up in that way. Well, you are going through their land, but Stagecoach views it as it's not their land anymore. So
correct.
Yeah. So anyway, he becomes the marshal of the town. He befriends Doc Hollywood. Doc Hollywood.
Fantastic Michael J. Fox film.
Michael J. Fox
film. Inspiration for the movie
Cars. Bad inspiration. That was your first problem.
Yeah. Should not have been made. There would be no Cars then.
Film. Doc Holliday is, they're an unlikely pair because Doc Holliday is the sort of unofficial marshal of the town. He runs the town. He's this lawful good sort of character, I guess, that sort of exists within this world. And then he befriends Wyatt Earp, who's sort of, chaotic good for Doc Holliday, lawful good for Wyatt Earp. And then they fight off the people that wrestled the cattle. And he falls in love with a woman named Clementine, who was Doc Holliday's girl. And let's start talking about the film other than the plot.
It's a really interesting movie because whereas Stagecoach and Grapes of Wrath had a very clear, we have to literally get to X, this is about a town in flux, and it's about them learning how to live with each other in a way that's a really cool bit of tension. That I really enjoy all these scenes with Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday because in every moment, thanks to also how great the actors are, you feel them disagreeing.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a whole town that's all disagreeing with each other for one way or another.
And there's this attempt to bring civility into the town as well. And Doc Holliday represents the old way of running things. And you have Wyatt Earp, the civil way of running things. And you end up, because this town is Tombstone, and it's a mess. And you could just be walking on the street and get killed very indifferently. The town almost exists as a character. Then later, we see Shakespeare being brought to town. Then after Shakespeare, we see the new church and religion being brought to the town, and the dance, where you have this very sort of like typical Western, let's go down to the revival and let's have a square dance type of thing. And you see that start to grow. And as this world starts to be created, the old world of Doc Holliday starts to diminish slowly by slowly. And a big part of that is the way that Wyatt Earp affects the town. But also an era that is this is the late Wild West, so it's changing.
Yeah. Things
are becoming different. And I think that I always like Western set in this time period, because that tug and pull is a very, very interesting, it leads to very interesting things thematically when you have that existing, because the East is coming west and it's going to create a new type of America. You're living on the outskirts of that sort of existence where you're getting some of the culture, but not all of it. So you have these two competing cultures that are existing, which are accented perfectly. And I was going to say Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday is the two different, but they're both from the West. The example would be Clementine, who arrives way late in the film.
And similar to how I described Henry Fonda last week, he, as Wyatt Earp, is once again so set on his principles. Like, he's not coming in here to compromise at all. He comes in, sees the place a shithole, says, I'm Marshall. No election. Just,
Oh, wait. He comes in to get a shave.
Never forget the shave. And there is just a complete lack of patience for, like, the corruption. In a scene that reminded me of another film we covered, which I guess we did cover another Western, the great film Maverick.
Oh, yeah.
This movie has a very similarly shot poker scene, akin to the very early poker scene in Maverick, when it's just like he's the new guy in town, and it's all revolved around people cheating and basically trying to cheat criminals during a poker game. And whereas Maverick is the hero of his movie, he is the one doing all the cheating. This one has Henry Ford completely Henry Fonda. I'm going to keep making the mistake. Well, only one more film. Of refusing to, like, allow this to happen at all.
Yeah, I mean,
goes to in the water, yells at the guy who's providing with the cards and whatnot, but he still has the very stern morality where, even though he knows this hand was cheating, he just watches him take the chips. Like, he wants to make sure this guy knows how much he disapproves what was happening. But it's the law of poker. I did not win the hand.
So what's also really cool about that, and way I think Ford works, like, masterfully, in particular in this film, is the way he sort of creates this real sort of verisimilitude. It's kind of the same thing. Why it's a little redundant. But the film, when you walk into the saloon there, and they're playing poker in the corner, and you got the long bar going down, you got the piano player, you got the prostitutes in there, you have Chihuahua walking around, who's...
We haven't described
yet. Why don't you, since I'll give you the honor of describing Chihuahua.
For the record, Chihuahua, capital C, not a dog. It is a
I knew there would be some quip. That's why I wanted to give it.
She is a woman of the night. She's a prostitute, right?
Well, I mean, is it explicitly said that she's a prostitute? She's an entertainer at the place. She's definitely probably dabbled in prostitution. She's a singer there as well. So
she is very much closer to the Doc Holliday side of how to run the town than the Wyatt Earp.
Well, she acts as sort of the queen of the town.
Right. She knows how to profit off of all sorts of kind of immoral shenanigans and is succeeding in a town that doesn't have a firm law structure.
Mm-hmm. And when someone like Wyatt Earp comes in, that's bad business for her.
Yeah. So he throws her in the water.
Yeah, it opens up
cheating.
For doing that. And then, so like the other driving force would be that she is committed to Doc Holliday as well. Mm-hmm. She's in love with Doc Holliday, and Doc Holliday definitely leads this on about as far as it can go. Mm-hmm. And then Clementine arrives, who is Doc Holliday's past love from the East, who shows up to take him back home. And what the movie doesn't really go into in detail is that Doc Holliday was living out west because Doc Holliday had tuberculosis, so he needed a dry, arid climate to live in order to make his tuberculosis more livable with his tuberculosis, right? That's not talked about in the film, I don't think, at all. But that is why the real Doc Holliday was out there. So she comes out to visit him and take him home, and he won't go with her. But the unspoken reason why is because he's not healthy. He's dying. Mm-hmm. So,
and that's, I think, the one bit of pushback that, like, because Wyatt Earp is so confident this is how the town should be, and the town kind of becomes what he thinks it should be, the one real kind of pushback of the pure happy ending that he's looking for is the lack of romantic conclusion. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, Clementine comes to town. He goes, well, I'm in love with you. And again,
talking about Earp.
Yeah, Earp. Sorry, mm-hmm. He comes in town. I'm in love with you in a very Hollywood fashion of, well, you're the pretty girl. I'm the leading man. Here we go. Mm-hmm. And it just never becomes satisfying for any of the four players. I mean, it is ultimately a sad story of no one able to exist in the world they want. Those four. She exists more as an idealization of mm-hmm.
what I would prefer, how I would prefer this story to end. So I mean, it's an unromantic film.
Right.
Wyatt Earp and Clementine don't end up together.
Exactly.
Spoiler. But they were never going to be mm-hmm. to begin with. This is not that kind of world. So you have Clementine existing almost as like a goal to achieve rather than than any real presentable characterization that affects the plot. I mean, she's hardly in the film.
And that's, to me, a flaw of the film because, I mean, I understand the idea of having people as more thematic pursuits than anything else. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, it does end up being more women than usual. But what the main three characters are so good. Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, and Chihuahua. Clementine is a nothing character. And so to have both men really have a history and a response to her makes them look weaker because she's just such a boring character.
I don't see it that way. I agree with what you're saying, that she's not much of a character, though, but I just see it again as this, yes, she's a boring character, she's a trope, she's an archetype, 100%. But My Darling Clementine is more like a lament. It's saying, like, she would be a better character if any of these characters were willing to invest in her and be with her, but they can't. I think it has a lot more to do with, like, the type of life that's coming that just hasn't yet arrived in the West. Like, this thing, like, Wyatt Earp's brother gets murdered in the beginning of the film. Mm-hmm. His cattle gets stolen. His other brother, one of his other brothers, is also dead by the end of the film. Doc Holliday is dead by the end of the film. My Darling Clementine is something that cannot exist in Tombstone yet. This is not a life we can live out here. Mm-hmm. So to me, she exists more of a representation of civilization and, a reworking of the West than an actual character.
Well, it's looking to try to...
Does it make sense what I'm saying?
It absolutely does. I think so. And it's something about trying to, like, create normalcy and comfort when there isn't any. Because, like, why would you stay in Tombstone? It's not like it has a great dock where, goods are coming in. It is a town that is pretty much a shithole. Mm-hmm. Don't be here.
Yeah, and the shithole town's going to attract shithole people, and Clementine is not. She's supposed to, whether it work for you or not, she's supposed to exist as a beacon of light in this town that it's not ready for yet.
But I mean, Wyatt Earp kind of stays.
She's going to be a school teacher at the end of the film. I mean, she literally is this idea. She is a characterization of this idea of the East moving West.
Mm-hmm.
And My Darling Clementine, again, is a lament to me. It's not to say, wow, Clementine, she was quite a darling. It's more like, wow, you know, in another life, you know. And, and of course, once there's going to be a school and that's getting established and she's going to be the school teacher there, that's going to be a very different Tombstone, one that Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp do not exist in.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is what it, at the nature of what the film is really about. And to me, that's very, very, that's melancholy in a way that's like sweet. Like it's a very, very sweet movie to me. Like the shootout at the OK Corral is nothing. Like you're building towards, this is not Stagecoach, okay? You're building towards this shootout that you know is coming. If you have any inkling of history, you know we're going there. And this movie's not about the shootout at all. It's just not.
And it's funny actually like how much it is underplayed, because you think
it's underplayed so much.
You think it'd be like the scene that John Ford's like waiting for, like, okay, yada yada yada, but I'm going to do this, and
I just don't think that's what this movie's about.
It's not, and it's not framed that way. It's framed more around these like quiet moment at bars with Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday sharing a table or going to the play together. Like you're watching a clash of ideals.
And the grand arc of the film is Tombstone.
Mm-hmm.
Tombstone is a very lawless place. By the end of Tombstone, Tombstone has changed.
Yeah. Doc
Holliday is dead.
Mm-hmm.
No spoiler. Wyatt Earp is gone.
Mm-hmm.
The school's there. Church is there. They're having dances. Like, Chihuahua's gone too.
Yeah.
So, there's also another really sweet film, part of the film where Doc Holliday has to operate on Chihuahua.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good scene.
I don't think I know.
That's probably the most romantic scene in the movie, actually, in a weird way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess so.
Mm-hmm.
Which is weird.
Yeah.
I did not recognize the actor who played Doc Holliday right away.
Mm-hmm.
Look at him now. I have seen him as like, you know, he's in Hollywood movies. But, man, I thought he was incredible.
Yeah, he's great.
I thought he was, again, not necessarily a method actor, but this was a guy who was just so confident to not have to have the big moment. Like, he knew how to use silence to his benefit in a really kind of specific, sometimes unnerving way of...
but still likable.
Still likable, still intriguing, and not just like super still. Like he moves his facial muscles, but I don't know. He had a very almost like ghost-like presence of a thing. Like he affected the larger room.
He does, and what's funny about that is that he also throws fits like a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And you end up still liking him. So, like, there's a lot happening with Doc Holliday in this film. He's not just there to be your superhero badass. I mean, he kind of is that, or your male fantasy of like rolling into a town and being the chief cowboy, and everyone does what you tell him to do. But like, he's that, but he's more,
right?
And a lot of that is the performance. But again, Henry Fonda is great too, though.
Oh,
like they both play great together. Like. You know, there's definitely some fantastic chemistry is going on here, and Chihuahua too. So, I mean, I don't know. Everyone's making everyone better in this film.
And Henry Fonda, who once again I'm just always amazed by, he gets to be just much angrier in this film. Like he is still very firm on what he believes.
He wants a shave,
but boy, is he! I mean, he's even angry like then, like so much. But it's very, just pushed down.
And also, it gives you sort of a windows and the ears into like what his past may have been like. Mm-hmm. He comes into the town with baggage.
Sure, he's an ex-sheriff,
and this is such a Western story.
Coming to town,
coming to town. The old grizzled marshal that has been through the shit before and just wanted the quiet life of raising cattle with his brothers, and then fate intervenes, and now he's got to say. I mean, this is basically the kickoff for every Western. And the fact that it's rooted in history makes it kind of, like, weird.
It was funny how much, like, I'm just rewatching this. I just see, like, how much influence this had on some different things. And I did not realize how big of an influence, just directly in so many ways, this has on the HBO show Deadwood. which I know is also a real town, but it just uses so much of what Ford set up in this movie to influence how they approach that story. Just did it in a grander, more expansive way, because that was a 30-hour show, ultimately. But it is as a
and
story.
maybe a movie.
It's about to be filmed. It's actually going to happen.
All right, well,
We'll see it once
I see the trailer, I'll start watching the show.
But I mean, that is a story which is mentioned. In
Oh,
this movie.
and it was a real town.
It was
too.
a real town.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that separates it from Tombstone is that Deadwood was not seen as part of the United States. It was on land set aside for Native Americans, and then immediately white people just took it over and were able to run a town outside of federal law. And so you get more of the pushback of, and you have a main character in that as a former sheriff of one town coming in to be sheriff of this town and trying to bring law and order when you have insane people like Ian McShane who just...
Well, the sheriff of the town is essentially the president of the United States of Deadwood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they acknowledge his authority, which is all quietly here of the push and pull of the future of the town. And
no help coming from the federal government yet.
Yeah.
But that's the whole thing. That's what the movie is. I mean, it could have been My Darling America. It had the same themes are there. Clementine is this representation of the good casting out the evil eventually, which, you can put a finer point on that and say whether that's good or not. The reworking of the West and the appropriation of the West and all that. But that's what Clementine is. Clementine is the new America coming. And
which is interesting that she brings education.
Yeah. They built a railroad. You build a railroad, people started moving west. And when they started moving west, bring the education, bring their Bibles too. It changed. America changes. And I feel like that's what she is. So you're right. I mean, the biggest problem in the film's the fact that the titular character is not a great character.
Yeah.
But I think it's more or less what she stands for.
But it really doesn't hurt the movie that much to me.
She's hardly in the movie to hurt it.
Not very long movie, even.
Well, that's the whole thing about all these Ford Westerns. I feel like they have an idea that these are 3-hour epics and stuff. They're not.
No, the longest one was by far Grapes of Wrath, which was an extra 40 minutes more than these other two.
I would be shocked if Grapes of Wrath's over 2 hours and 10 minutes. It feels 3 hours, but...
It's about 2:10, 2:15, around that range.
Around, okay.
But these are both 90-ish.
Yeah, I mean, there's just an hour and a half, so it's it's weird. I think, really, that's Sergio Leone's Westerns that have the big, long, grand epics, so... And
then late, Hollywood, doing How the West Was Won or The Alamo, where they just did 3 hours because they're competing against Lawrence Arabia.
Yeah, that's true.
All this stuff. But Darling Clementine, yeah, I really had not... I saw it when I was kind of going through some Ebert favorites, but I watched the same month.
It's always a great movies list.
Yeah, and I saw the same month as The Searchers and Stagecoach. This was a Ford kick, and I just kind of in my mind just kind of forgot most of it because I just thought that there's so much more. And rewatching it now, it's cool. It's really it reminds me more of when Ford would do his inner city gangster films of sorts. It's personally, it was always about characters clashing in a way that, Stagecoach is kind of still working as a bit of a community more than a clashing.
For sure.
But no, this is really good.
Well, and also shows that he can make a different type of Western.
Yes.
And, this is nothing like Stagecoach.
No, and it was funny when we were watching it last night. It is such a sincere Western. There is no meta commentary on we're going to deconstruct the genre. This is the genre.
Yeah.
And the next 2 films, I think we are now going to see Ford look at his legacy and look at what the Western means more than what he did for his first 10 years.
Yeah. And at least changing the way those characters tell their stories, or the way, or really the characters changing period within the story, or. Again, we're going to talk about it, but John Wayne in The Search is a very nuanced character, I feel like, whereas he's not so much in a lot of his films. He is in Stagecoach, but anyway, we'll get there. When I think of deconstruction of a Western, I'm just hopping to McCabe and Mrs. Miller. It's like the only thing that hits me like over and over.
Hey, we did cover that Western. We jumped to 3 that we had.
Yeah. Well, see, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, though, is an anti-Western. It's like, I'm going to take all your Western tropes and I'm going to invert them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and sometimes just mock them.
And it's so good.
Yeah.
Such a good movie.
All right, so we'll be back next week to talk about The Searcher, which I'm very excited about. Until then, you can leave a comment about this movie or any movie over at theartimmortal.com. While you're there, you can check out other podcasts, including The Immortals, which reviews the 1001 movies, albums, food, songs, and TV shows you must consume before you die. This week, we're covering a film I have not seen yet, Heaven and Earth Magic. Don't I know?
Quite a title.
I know. But because it is a episode that ends with a 10, it's a bonus pick by one of the co-hosts, and Lee had us watch Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown series, which is fantastic. I've actually never seen an episode before this, so I'm excited to talk about that. Also, we have Ad Absurdum, the podcast where 2 lawyers talk about the real-life legal implications. You can check out any of their episodes. The last one is Escape from New York. Where can we find you?
Constant Diversion. It's a YouTube channel.
Nice. Your Dark Souls one. How's it going?
You know you want me to give more, and I never do.
I just want to get you some views.
Yeah, the Dark Souls ones, it's pretty popular, man. Sure. Go see another one.
All right, fine.
The views are already in on that one.
The one about the Tales from the Borderlands, that's a great one. It's probably your best video.
Yeah, who wrote that?
We'll just look that up later.
That guy from the Immortals wrote that.
Pedro.
No.
Also, special thanks to Adam Lord for all the music. Leave us an iTunes review. That'll help people find our show. Like I said, we'll be back next week with The Searchers. Until then, I'm Austin Nigger.
I'm Eric Martindale.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Waiting for you at the theater, Mr. Thorndyke.
Thank you, sir. Shakespeare was not meant for taverns, nor for tavern louts.
Yorick stays here.
¿Qué pasa? ¿Qué pasa? ¡Ay, este bandido!
My apologies, Marshal. Ike and Finn have had a little whiskey.
Sure, I figure they're just having themselves some fun. Come on, Mr. Thorndyke, I'll take you to the theater.
Stop, Paul! Stop, Paul! Stop! No!
When you pull a gun, kill a man.
Yes, Paul.